Hello and welcome out to Outbreak Gamers. Can't even get the name of my own show right. My goodness. Oh goodness. Outbreak Gamers. Gamer. Okay, good. So anyway, hello. I'm David Anthony, your host. Apparently, sometimes when I don't mess things up, I apparently have a speech impediment tonight. Okay, we'll get through this. Goodness. So I am happy to have with me Elaine Gómez Sanchez. Elaine, hello.
Hello. Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really, really good. And how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Had a great work day and starting to plan some things in life too, so it's exciting.
Nice, nice. That sounds great. That is awesome. Well, Elaine, I'm a big fan of the international Xbox International podcast, and talking to those guys, every single one of them recommended that I interview you. So let's kind of we
That's
want to find
awesome
out
to
more about
hear.
you. Well, no, but that's a good thing. They're
Yes.
very positive and very they said you would be a great interview, and I'm like, well, I don't know this person. I want to get to know this person. So that's what we're doing. Yay.
Oh, big thank you to those guys. They're doing a great job, and it's always really fun to get on the podcast with them and chit chat about game design and all the games coming out. And I don't know, I have a great time. So I'm glad they have good things to say.
Oh yeah, yeah, most definitely. All good things for sure. Well, Elaine, I guess if you don't mind, let's kind of start off with maybe what was your first job or maybe some education that you might have had.
Sure. So my first job ever has nothing to do with anything that I do today.
Right. Same here.
um, so it was an opportunity that came to me from like a family friend, and they worked at a dental office, and they knew that I was studying information technology at the time. I got a bachelor's degree from Rutgers University in information
Nice.
technology, and all of that was like data architecture and a lot of things that had to do with the like internal infrastructure of like computer systems and things like that. So obviously I was interested in that and in tech in general. So they're like, hey Ling, we need to like digitize all of our patient charts. And they were literally trying to have like thousands and thousands of records and putting all that information on the computer and the database software that they were using. So
Hmm.
that was my very first job. It was a summer job, and I successfully helped them go through like thousands of patient records, and we
Wow.
ended up tossing all the old stuff away. It's a lot of paper, a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
folders. Um, and it was fun. I enjoyed it because I liked the data entry part of it and like fixing things, calling people to update information and stuff like that. But that
Hmm.
was my very first job. And I got so excited because it was my first like paycheck, right?
Oh
Be
yeah.
like, finally I can buy things for myself and not ask my parents for like $20 to go to, the movies or like money to like buy clothes or anything. So
Hmm.
that was really exciting. And I know that sounds a little bit weird too, because it's like you were in college and like you were still asking for your parents for money. But like that was just my reality. My
Yeah.
parents didn't want me to work. They wanted me to be a full time student and focus on my studies.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. But finally, I was like, you know what? I do want my own money. I want to be independent and I want to save to like, get a car or like go on a trip with friends or
Hmm.
whatever it may be. So that was a lot of fun. And in regards to what I studied, so like I mentioned, I got a bachelor's degree in information technology, and that was kind of a pivot because initially when I went to college, my mind was set on like pre-medicine because I wanted to be a doctor.
Mm.
So I was studying something called biomedical engineering because in my mind I was like, well, let's say that I do all these courses and I decide not to go to med school. What am I going to fall back on if I just do pre-medicine?
Right.
So in my mind with engineering, I was like, I can still get a job in like tech and like possibly like the medical field and it'll be a good job. But if I decide not to go to med school, I'll be okay. So that was kind of like my mindset. And like I would say a year and a half into the curriculum, I was like, this sucks. Like I hated all the courses. And it wasn't so much the courses, right? It was like I wasn't enjoying it, and because I wasn't enjoying it, I wasn't absorbing the information. And because of that, I was starting to fail. So
Mm,
it's not that I was not intelligent and I couldn't do it. It was like literally I didn't like it so much that it was just like not wanting to stay in my brain. And it
right.
literally go into one ear and not the other. And I would go to tutoring, I would do extra homework, I would stay after class. Like I was trying really hard to do everything that I could to pass. Specifically like high level math and and the high level sciences that had to do with math. So like the calculus, like 2 and 3 were an issue for me, and like physics for engineers, which was harder than regular physics. It's like that's the type of stuff that I was really struggling with.
Right.
Um, and I got really frustrated, to be honest, because I
Yeah.
was really used to doing really well in school. And I was like in the top of my class in high school. Like I was in my honors classes. Um, and I excelled in school. So I was like, this is what I'm good at. I'm good at academics. Why am I failing? But it was just that. It was just that I didn't like it. And I had
Yeah.
to have a big sit down with my parents, which is like one of the scariest things to do as a Latina child. To be like, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to go against your wishes, by the way, and do what I want to do. It's like, what? Like you're gonna be a starving artist? Like what are you gonna do with your life?
Yeah.
Um, because there's this like picture perfect scenario for like Latino parents and for a lot of minority families where it's like your child can be one of three things: a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer. And outside of that, it's not a real job. Outside of that, there's no job security. And it's like and that's what I thought my life was gonna be. I was gonna fall into one of those three buckets.
Mhm.
But when I went to school and figured out that that's not what I wanted to do, it was hard to realize that on my own. That it's like what I want to do is not going to align with what my parents want me to do.
Right.
And then having the courage to sit them down and disappoint them was hard because I didn't want to disappoint them.
Right, of
I
course.
wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to feel proud. And me being like, hey, I want to switch my major to technology, they were like, well, what are you going to do with that? Like a lot of technology is getting outsourced. And the reason why they didn't want me to go into tech was because both of my parents are in tech.
Ah,
But they started like in the big boom in the 80s when everything was starting up with like computer and data structures and things like that. So they were able to find their place and make a career out of that, just because they were at the right place at the right time.
right.
But for me, they were like, that's not the case anymore now. And we know because we are in that industry. Um, so I was like, it's just, I really enjoy it. And if it's not meant for me, like I'll figure it out down the road. But this is what I want to do. So that was a tough conversation to have. But once I pivoted and switched my major from trying to chase after biomedical engineering with pre-med to information technology, it
Mhm.
opened a lot of different doors for me. So that's why I ended up majoring in that, and it took me one more year because I had to switch majors and
Right.
credits didn't transfer or were not um, they were not valid when
Right.
when it was like the school switch. So it was during that time that I met one of my mentors and professors. His name's Dr. Joe Sanchez. Not related, by the way, not related to him. Um, but Dr. Joe was a TA. He was a teacher's assistant in one of my information technology 101 classes.
Mhm.
And he was like a really dope TA because imagine me in my early 20s. I've always been like a punk rocker, like metalhead. So
Nice.
like wearing black with my like stud belt and like having my big headphones blasting my metal. Like I was just like different than like the average like college student.
Right.
And when I took that the first day that we walked in, it was a big lecture hall of like 350 people. So it's a huge auditorium class. And here is a professor who's like really old. And then this young TA Latino professor who was like 6 feet tall with like a gnarly beard. Like, did you ever listen to Anthrax?
Yes.
That dude with the long,
Yes, I
long
do.
beard.
Ah,
So
yeah.
that was exactly how Dr. Joe's beard looked like. And he had his earlobe stretched, and he had his hair was like a little bit like red, and he was wearing all black. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a dope course because I have the dopest TA.
That's
um,
awesome.
but I was able to relate, right? And he was actually doing his PhD in game studies. So all of his work with his doctorate had to do with how people interact socially inside games like Second Life, or in games that were back in the day like MMORPGs that were just starting in like the 90s, late
Mm-hmm.
90s and 2000s. So like literally that was his whole life. It's just studying games, and I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right.
So as a product of being a PhD student, like he had to teach courses. So I ended up taking two or three of his courses on video games and like the social impacts of video games, and more like the conversations and discussions that come out of that, like legislature that has been brought on because of games that started in music. So like the
Right.
rating system, or things like, violent events that have happened and where video games have been blamed, for causing the violence, or inciting the violence. So it was a lot of really interesting courses that he gave, and really opened like the doors a lot for me to like see games as an actual career path and industry to dive into, versus just a product that I can just buy and enjoy and then put it away and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was through him that he kind of took me under his wing, because he pulled me out of class one day because I enjoyed the subject so much that I was acing everything. So in comparison to like the calculuses on the sciences, where I
Yep.
was like barely scraping by. Like I would get like a 68 or a 70 on a test, and with these his courses, I was acing like my 12, 14-page research papers with like 98s and hundreds. Like not an issue at all for me because I enjoyed it so much.
Right.
So he pulled me aside one day and he said, "Hey, Elaine, like I noticed that you're like really passionate and I can see a lot of potential in you, and I wonder if you want to pursue a graduate degree. Like, do you want to do a master's degree? Do you want to do a doctorate?" And I told him that I wasn't really thinking about it, that my eyes were always set on being a doctor and now switching my major. I just wanted to get a bachelor's degree, graduate, and go work. But he's like, you know what? I think you would be great because you're great, an excellent writer. So you would do a really good job in a graduate school because that's exactly the type of work that you would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, if you're interested, I'd be happy to put in a recommendation letter for you for a program in the University of Pittsburgh. Let
Wow.
me know if you want to do that, and it's a summer program. And I was like, I'll think about it. And I talked to like my friends, I talked to my parents, and I was like, I think I'll do it. Like, there's no harm in applying and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
So I applied and I got in, and that's where I met another girl. Her name's Tony Pizza. She's like really cool. And Tony
Nice.
was doing a master's degree at New York University, and their master's program called Game Center. And it was a really new program where it was game design and game development. And she was she was really nice and like trying to give me information and resources about it, because I was like, what, you can get a graduate degree in game design? Like, how does that work? Do you make games like for school? Like you don't have to like write papers and like do like homework assignments, like you're like in a game engine making a game? And she's like, yeah, that's exactly what we do, and we analyze them, we play games, we talk about them. And I was mind blown because I didn't
Yeah.
know that even existed. It was nothing that anybody that I knew was into, so I didn't have access to that information.
Right.
And as soon as she told me that, like literally like 2 hours after I chatted with her, I was like on the internet searching like NYU Game Center, like what are the requirements to enroll in the program? Are there any other like programs like it out in anywhere in the United States or the world that I could apply to? And that's exactly what I ended up doing. So I applied to a program. I got selected at University of Southern California, which at the time was the number one game design school in the country, and got in through help with Dr. Sanchez, who wrote me a recommendation letter, and
Mm-hmm.
a few other professors. And that's where I learned making games. I didn't even know what Dungeons and Dragons was until I went into that school.
Wow.
I was 23 years old and I had no idea what like Magic the Gathering was. Because in my family, in my circle, in my
Yeah.
community, that doesn't exist,
Right.
or that didn't exist. And if it did exist, it was very like, hush hush where people didn't talk about it, I guess.
Hmm.
And to me, when I thought about board games and things like that, it was like Monopoly or like the Game of Life, like old school
Right.
stuff, and not the new stuff that is getting made like now that is really interesting and innovative. But it really changed my whole life. And it was that one person, Dr. Sanchez, who's like,
Yeah.
I can see a lot in you, and I can give you a resource if you want to take it. And
That's
a
so
lot of
awesome.
people don't have that chance. So
Right.
I'm very,
Right.
very, very fortunate that happened to me. Sorry, that was like my whole
No,
like
no,
life,
no. No, that's
my whole
awesome.
career. Like that's where I began. Literally, it was
Well,
like,
that's amazing. That
thank
really
you.
is. I think it's awesome. And like you said, with those other games that you weren't familiar with, I mean, I look at it this way, in life, you don't know until you know.
Hmm.
I mean, there's so many things in life, that somebody may know about, and then somebody else 2 blocks away from you, they have absolutely no clue or no, it's
Hmm.
just because it's not in their wheelhouse, you
Right,
know.
exactly. Or they're not
So
exposed to it,
right,
and
exactly.
that's
So I mean,
exactly what
it's
happened to me.
yeah, but that you did get exposed to it, that's
Hmm.
awesome. I mean, it was kind of a
Yeah.
blessing, I think, right?
Yeah, for sure. It helped me understand a lot of things that I didn't know about games, like in the back end. But even then it was a thing that also kind of ostracized me, because even within like the group of 20, students that were part of the cohort,
Right,
everybody knew D&D and D and all these things and loved Star Wars and like all this other stuff. It's part of like nerd and geek culture. And
right.
I'm a metalhead that like goes into mosh pits. Like I had no idea. Like I love a
Oh,
horror game. Like a console games I knew. Because that's what I
mhm.
had access to. That's what I played. But even then, I felt ostracized because I was like, "Oh, you don't know what D&D is? Like, how can you be a game designer? How can you be a game developer? Oh, you don't like Star Wars? There's no way that you're gonna understand the analogies of good and evil when making your game." And it's just like, what?
That's what you say. Have you ever listened to Cannibal Corpse? That's all I gotta say.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right? It's just like I got plenty of life experiences, let me tell you. But but yeah, it was very strange too, because it was a tug of war between like, you're too different to be here, you don't know enough, you don't understand the references, and I had to really like fight my way through all of that,
Right.
like a lot of opposition of people who like really didn't believe in me, or people who just didn't even understand while I was trying to study game design, because maybe I should be doing something else with my life.
Well, good for
Um,
you.
but I kept going. Yeah, exactly. I was like, let me prove you wrong.
Exactly. Well, and today you definitely have. So
Yes, for
just
sure.
saying. So maybe you found some of those people and be like, oh, and what are you doing now? Is your career?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Sad. Sad
yeah,
for
exactly,
you.
exactly. Still playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
Good for
right.
you. That's
Yeah.
funny. Oh goodness. All right. So I guess with that, did it with your education kind
Mhm,
of I guess not to say wrapped up, but I mean set you on the path. So
mhm.
I guess what opportunities became your way as far as in the field that you were working toward?
So the game industry is tough because people think that it's like this big thing that is closed up, and there's like the elite people like Hideo Kojima and stuff like that. Like you don't have
Right.
access to those people, but the reality is the industry is very small, and like plenty of times I have been in the same room with Hideo Kojima. I've been like
Nice.
literally right next to him, right? I accidentally bumped into his entourage by accident one day.
That's so funny.
Going to the bathroom, because he gets followed in like V formation, like the Canadian geese when they fly. That's his entourage is like that right behind him. But
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
it is funny. But the industry is small, and with that comes like job roles. The roles are just not as open, especially for game design. So even right now, if you were to go to a website like Indeed or even LinkedIn and look at jobs,
Hmm.
like it's hard to find a game design role open, because that's like the first thing that goes. Every team builds their design team first. So if
Hmm.
a game is already getting like developed, the likelihood of their design team being complete is like 90%. So it's hard to get a job as a designer. But with my education, I was able to teach game design first before starting as a full-time game designer at a studio.
That's
So
awesome.
what the master's degree was able to do was give me the opportunity to be a professor. So like in a lot of with a lot of different disciplines, you need a PhD to be at that level that you can have be a professor and have accreditation to teach at a university. But with an MFA in the arts, that is the equivalent of a PhD. So I could say, yeah, I am at the highest level that I could possibly be in the study of games through that master's, and I can teach at university level, colleges, and things like that. So because I was not able to find an open position as a game designer right after I graduated, I went the academic route. And because I like research, because I do like to teach, I
Hmm.
taught game design for about almost 2 years
That's
at my
amazing.
alma mater. So I was able to go back to Rutgers University and
Yeah.
actually take the place of Dr. Joe because he went to another college. And he was like, "Hey, Elaine, my role is opening up. Do you want to take it?" So that was really cool. And I was able to take over one of his courses, which I took myself. So that was like really nice. It was like closing the loop
Full
on
circle right there.
going full circle on our relationship, which was really nice. Um, so I taught both game development at the level of like actually coding and teaching inside the game engine and teaching folks how to make games in there, and also more at a theoretical level where we discuss, laws and like game design theory and things like that.
Hmm.
So that was really really fun for me, and it reinforced a lot of the things that I learned myself. Because in teaching, you kind of like in that repetitive process, you like relearn or refresh. So that was really helpful for me too, as I was making my own little games on the side so that I could
Hmm.
stay active and not lose ideas or not lose exercising my design muscles. So after teaching, I got an opportunity at a small independent game company based in Arizona. So essentially, they were having this educational games program for middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I was teaching at that program based in New York City. And I just let them know, hey, I would love to get a game design opportunity. Is it something that I can do with the studio in Phoenix? The mother the not the mother studio, but it was like the overarching studio
Hmm.
of the program. So we made arrangements, and I moved from New Jersey to Arizona to pursue a full-time game design role, and that's where I really started to learn and grow in my career. So I worked on two games there: the Endless Mission, which was on early access, and Beyond Blue, which got released across all consoles and platforms. Both more of like educational type of
Hmm.
games,
Sure.
but both very very different in like design and audience and all that stuff. But I learned a lot. I learned like porting for console is difficult depending on what console you're doing it for, and
Right.
then for PC, testing like low end and high end, making sure that the game runs on like across the board on different operating systems and mobile as well. So that's like a whole other different ball game as well. And the Switch. So it's like they all have different requirements. You need to understand and learn the pipeline,
Hmm.
because it's not just the game design. I'm not just in the documents and just conceptualizing things. Because of my technical background with that information technology, I'm able to learn a lot of programming. It just came more natural to me than for other designers.
Hmm.
So I get to implement like my own designs and work with engineers and other disciplines as well to go in engine and actually make the stuff work, make the logic work. So it was a lot of learning, because those
Yeah.
are things that I didn't really have the experience with working with other people. So I made my own games prior, and I know how I work. I know the my knowledge cap and my
Mm-hmm.
skills cap. But when you go into a studio and they're making these big systems and complicated designs, and you going in there and being like, okay, I only know about maybe 50% of what's going on, and then I need to like learn as I go.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very challenging.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a lot of fun being there almost 4 years, learning on uh, different game engines, learning different systems, working with various types of people, both good and bad, right? Because
Right, right.
on any workplace, you sometimes have people who really give you a hard time or put you down, and you kind of have to work through it.
Wow.
But it was great. It was great, and that's where I met my husband.
Very
So it
cool.
was
Very cool.
a great place to be at.
Yeah, it
Um,
sounds like it.
yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. I mean, that's uh, I find I'm riveted. I'll just tell you that right now. I think it's very fascinating, and for you to be able to, like you said, like spend 4 years and
Mhm.
going through the different process. I mean, even though I mean you were like working on the that's you're continuing to grow your education in
Yes,
the industry, and it makes you a more valuable, and be able to well, I've worked on this and this,
right.
and these platforms, and so that's a hopefully it will open up or has opened up great opportunities for you, and will
Yes,
continue because I guess it's one of those fields where you never really quit learning with it
absolutely.
always evolving.
Right. Literally every couple of months, something new pops up. And with every game that gets put out, somebody's trying to push the boundaries of where we can take games and
Mhm.
how complicated our systems can get. And a lot of people don't know that there's like different types of like perspectives of game developers, right? I would say, and this is my personal opinion, there's a new
Mhm.
school and an old school. And like the old school developers are really kind of like grounded in their top 5 games from like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And they are the type of people that are not playing current games, that are
Mm.
not reading the new stuff. And they're just um, kind of have like blinders on
Mm.
and very focused on like the past and what has worked for them in the past and kind of
Right.
stick with that. um, and there's a big difference between old school like that and new school, which is like people like me who are constantly playing indie games and triple games that are out. We're constantly in the loop of like what studios are doing what and like what new systems are getting put out and open sourcing that can be used, or even reading books, because even game design itself evolves throughout the years. So there's
Mhm.
plenty of books and resources to read up on and catch up on and see like I can expand and continue to grow in my craft. Um, and it's interesting to me that there's not more of that. I find a lot of folks who are older than me who don't have the time, right? Because they have families, they have kids, they
Right.
have other responsibilities. And then comparing that with people like me who are like in serious relationships or single, and we don't have responsibilities with a family, so we have more
Mhm.
time to be able to read and play and kind of like do our own professional development. But in those type of schools, you will see like who's pushing like it for innovation and who's really trying to like make a difference, and it shows in the games that we're making and
Mhm.
the games that are getting nominated for awards and things like that.
Right.
The It funnels everything. So there may be thousands and thousands, even hundreds of thousands of games being developed all over the world, but how many do we actually play and hear about? It's like a very small percentage. And it's
Wow.
those people who are really pushing the envelope and trying to do new stuff and getting it in front of your screen so that you have access to it. So it's a lot of things, but it's an interesting thing to see as well, like behind the scenes,
Right.
because it really pushes you. It's like I don't want to learn just for myself. I want to learn more so that I can help the project that I'm in be the best version that it can be. Um,
Right.
so if I'm doing it and everybody else is doing it all together, that's when it really makes the difference. And we can really make some cool stuff. But
Yeah.
making games is hard. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would assume that it is. I enjoy
yeah.
playing them.
Yes. We all do, right? But
Yeah,
yeah,
most of
making
us.
games is really hard, and it's not so much that the programming part, right? Because yeah, sure, programming gets complicated.
Right,
Sometimes you think that a thing will take 2 weeks, and it continues to break, and it ends up taking 2 months
right.
to be able to finish, or sometimes 6 months. Like it really depends. But it's interesting. I always tell people when they ask me, like, "Well, what are the skill sets to be a good game developer or a good game designer?" Like,
Mhm,
what is it that you have done that you found successful? And to be honest, aside from the technical, like you can always learn the technical. You can always get better at programming. You got to
mhm,
start somewhere, and
right,
then you'll become, intermediate and an expert perhaps on a specific type of programming. But with game development in general, the most valuable skill set is being a good human being, because
nice.
working with people every single day is very hard, and that's why games are hard, because you need to sit in a meeting and you need to have somebody in leadership tell you, "Hey, we don't like how this is working. We don't like how this looks, so we have to change it." And you
Mhm,
being able to take that feedback and not take it personal and be like, "Well,
right,
screw you. I put in like 4 weeks of work on that thing. I work
right,
after hours, like how dare you tell me that like this is not going to work?" Instead of taking things personally, and who wouldn't, right? Like
right.
who
Yeah,
wouldn't take it that way? What makes the world of a difference if you can just breathe in, breathe out, and be like, "Okay, how do I separate myself personally from this feedback and actually take it to the game and make the game better and make this design better?" And that's the type of skill sets that are most valuable in game development. And not a lot of people have those social skill sets. Not a lot of
yeah,
people know how to be kind when somebody's being mean, when somebody is putting you down. Not everybody knows how to hold their tongue and listen instead of trying to have a rebuttal or an argument for everything that is
or an
said.
excuse.
Yes, or
Yeah,
an excuse. So
yeah,
game development only happens through teamwork. And when you have teams of 50, 100, 500, thousands of people, it's critical to have that skill set and be an asset for your team and not the weakest link. That could really make coming to work every day miserable.
right.
And I have been in those instances. Many of us have been in those instances. So that's why it's really, really hard to make games. It's not just, hey, like we have to fight with the technology. We have to constantly like find solutions for broken things all the time. It's
Mhm,
also the human part, and people often forget that. It's the having to be in agreement, being on the same page, willing to work with each other every single day, day in and day out for years. Because games sometimes take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to make. Imagine
wow.
working with the same folks for 7 to 8 years on a thing.
Yeah.
You get tired of each other.
Oh, I'm sure.
But you need to learn to be kind and collaborate and partner with people. So yeah, it's a tough world out there. But that's why we're also so passionate about the work that we make, because we really
Right.
pour out um, all of our love, all of our energy, all of like our know-how. We pour it into our work, um, and it can show as well.
Yeah,
It can really make some of our games or systems or designs really shine, because part of us is in those games.
exactly, exactly. I tell you,
Yeah.
um, listening to you talk, I mean, it's you can tell you're very passionate about your career
Oh,
and
thank
then the
you.
work that you know. It's great. I think it's wonderful. Let me ask you this: from the gaming, one of the things I think is to me, it's obviously it's very important, and thank goodness there's companies that are starting to really bring it to the forefront over the last maybe 5 years or so is the accessibility
Mhm,
of certain games. With whether it be Phil Spencer pushing the envelope on making sure that there was a controller
mhm,
that they could be adaptable to just about any person's level of ability, to play a game and still be able to enjoy a game.
mhm.
And I think that's Is that something that you've, as well, I mean, I guess with any project, you have to probably keep that in mind at some point that there has to be some kind of, okay, cool. This is going to do this, this, and this. But how can we back work it to where it can still work with these other, type tools that are available?
Yeah, accessibility has become one of those things for me, especially in the past 2 years since the pandemic, or actually about to be 3 years,
Yeah.
that I really have taken a deep dive into because I'm very interested in it. Um, and accessibility, like I've heard discussions online between the player community and developers where there's discussion of things like, well, why do we need it if only like very small percent of people need it? Like, I don't need an accessibility feature. I never use accessibility features. Oh, that's for people who want to play games on easy or whatever it may be. Like, it's such a strange argument to me because in technology, like for decades, um, we can use the example of our phones or even the
Hmm.
websites that we visit. Accessibility is a core pillar of human computer interaction and web design, application design, and there's principles by which technology is built on, that are accessible, that have been around for a very, very long time, and you unknowingly use them every single day. Like there's a reason why if you have an iPhone and you get a call, the accept call button is green and not blue or not orange. There's a reason why that's a color. There's a reason why it's a circle. And it all has to deal with accessibility design. And you can like dive deep into it by researching it online or reading a book on the user experience.
Right.
And a great book that I would recommend actually, it's called The Design of Everyday Things. And it is a book that talks about like why a doorknob was designed the way that it was designed, or why
Wow.
escalators were designed the way that they were designed. And it really goes into the theory and the psychology of like how humans see things and how
Yeah.
humans interact with things.
I'll
Um,
put that in the show notes too, so that some
yes.
people can make it easier for
Um,
them to find.
yeah, and it's a great book. It's an excellent read. And a lot of designers, especially UX, which are user experience designers, like have read that book.
Hmm.
Um, but the reality is that is something that's already been in many, many fields, and it's just now starting to be an important thing in games. So we're really behind, like we're decades behind, in
Right.
comparison to other fields and other forms of media. Um, but the reason why it's important to me is because when I was little, I got really, really sick. And when I got sick, I contracted something called gangrene, which is like the death of your tissue.
Right.
And it was because of that gangrene that I went into septic shock. So, septic shock
Goodness.
is like one of the worst things that could ever happen to you medically because all your major organs shut down. So, my liver, my kidneys, my heart, literally all shut down. And I was able to survive. Obviously, I'm here today.
Yes.
But as a cause of all those things, the way that they had to manage that bacteria and that gangrene and remove it from my body was through amputations. So I have amputations on my hands and my feet. So I'm missing a few digits.
Hmm.
And growing up, I didn't think anything of it because all of this happened to me when I was 3. So I learned how to
Right.
tie my shoes. I learned how to type on the computer. I learned how to do everything with that because I was so little. So I found a way.
Yes.
So growing up, I was like, I don't have a disability. Like I'm completely normal. um,
That's
but I
awesome.
am not normal, right? So it came like these things. When for example, Guitar Hero came out, I found it very difficult to play with a guitar because some of my fingers were I was not able to reach the buttons.
Right.
So if it wasn't for the lefty flip option, I would not have been able to play Guitar Hero because it was through the lefty option that I had enough uh, grip in order to touch all the buttons. And that right there, you may not think of it, but that was an accessibility feature,
Yeah.
doing a lefty flip.
Right.
And I remember students in school having lefty notebooks because when they would write with a pen, it would smear if it was in the other direction. So having a lefty notebook made it so that their ink wouldn't smear. So it's fascinating that these
It
things
is.
have been around us and we just don't think anything of it. But it's like, wow, like there's certain people who would not be able to play if something as simple as a lefty flip on Guitar Hero would not have existed. So to me, that was like my first encounter. And it wasn't until a couple years ago I was like, wow, I do have a disability with my amputations. There's certain things that I cannot do.
Right.
And there's certain actions on a controller that are more difficult for me to make because I literally can't reach the
Right.
bumpers or the trigger buttons. So that's why I started getting even more interested because it was also personal for me. Like in the
Right.
games that I make, I want to make sure that people like me or people who, have some type of disability can still enjoy games because they deserve them, just like everybody
Right.
else. I didn't ask to get amputations.
Right.
A blind player did not ask to not have sight. Or a deaf player did not wish to not be able to hear.
Right.
So how they're people just like us who want to enjoy games just like us. So
Mhm.
why not make options or design things already with those things in mind so that everybody can play? Um, so that's why I'm passionate about it. And I love the fact that there are more studios investing in accessibility design because it's not as simple as like, hey, design team, you have to make accessibility features now. Like, take a look at God of War, take a look at The Last of Us, and do what they did. Like, it doesn't
Right.
work that way.
Right.
Every game is different. So the needs for, uh, Dead Space remastered are not the same needs as something like, I don't know, Cuphead, because they're
Mhm.
two different types of games,
Right.
completely different genres that require different things. So it's also having that understanding of like, you may not be able to fix everything, right?
Mhm.
We're not asking for perfection to create the perfectly accessible game that everybody can play, but it's giving more people the options to opt into playing your game,
Yeah.
and having it, whether it be uh, plugging in the accessibility controller. Like that's something that you need to keep in mind in button remapping.
Right.
So making that a thing where it's like, yes, you can automatically plug in your accessibility controller and it will allow you to map things out for you. Even just having that option is
Mhm.
game changing for a lot of people. But it requires people to understand that that thing exists,
Yes.
and that there are accessibility pillars that can easily be used in the pipeline of game dev or game design. And more studios are investing in that type of training because that requires money
Oh,
and
yeah.
it requires time from the people that are working on the game, and also may require new positions inside the studio
Mm.
where people who are accessibility leads can then be the go-to people, um, and lead the design teams on those type of things. So examples, Sony Santa Monica has an accessibility, like they have a UI UX team,
Mhm.
like most games, but they consult with accessibility. So that's one way that they do it. So you hire a bunch of accessibility consultants and you bring them on board temporarily for however long you need, and
Mhm.
they're constantly there to give you feedback and help you design through problems and things like that. There's also the route of studios like EA, who may have a lot more financial resource.
Mhm.
Um, and then they have accessibility departments. So there's an accessibility lead, and they have a whole team of accessibility folks that they lead and they help different game projects on. So it's starting to really become a thing and a role that is desired at various companies around the states, and I'm sure abroad as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really fantastic to see that being something that people care about. Because one thing is just, you value it, you think like,
Mhm.
oh, this is something really important, and then you just think about it and you let it simmer and you're like, okay, whatever, moving on. But
Yeah.
another thing is valuing and investing in it and putting the money to hire the people and
Mhm.
investing the time to create the programming, to create the art, to create the designs that are needed to make the system so that a player can see it and interact with it. So um, if you're gonna walk the walk and talk the talk, like, do it, and
Yeah.
not just like, breeze through it, because that's not going to be a benefit to anyone.
Right. Right. That's awesome. Well, I didn't know we were actually going to go down that road so deep, and I'm really glad we did. And it was one of those things where it just kind of popped in my head, and I'm really, and thank you so much for
You're
your
so
insight in
welcome.
that too. This is awesome. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm absolutely enjoying this. I don't know about you, but
Yes,
I'm loving it.
absolutely.
But I guess with that, if you don't mind, let's let's talk about like I guess where you work now, and what your current role is, and maybe some projects that you're working on currently
Of course.
that you
So,
can talk about.
of course, yeah. So, yeah, NDAs are a thing. So they're
Yes, yes, they are.
non-disclosure
Oh yeah,
agreements.
yeah. Full
Um,
respect to that. So please don't.
so
I'm
we
not
have
telling you.
not we have not released the well, rather we have not announced the game that we're currently working on at Brass Lion yet. So it remains unannounced.
Fair enough.
But we can say because this is already public is that it's an action RPG. So if you think of action RPGs, they're complicated, big games.
Yeah.
So pretty much like it's a big game. Our team is about 50, 50 to 55 people right now.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
It's
But
okay.
we're a fairly small team in comparison to other places, and we're doing a lot of work for a small team. Um, but my role as senior game designer is to both do design work um, conceptually. So that's coming up with the designs on paper and documenting it and sharing that information to team members.
Mm-hmm.
And another part of it is implementing it. So if I come up with a design, I can prototype it inside the game engine and get it to a functional state and show it to the rest of the team and be like, hey, this is I'm just gonna make something up. This is the water balloon fight mechanic.
Yeah, yeah.
And that will be like let's say this is the idea that I had on paper. I conceptualized it. I went into the game engine. I made like a water balloon projectile. You can throw it and it splatters, right?
Right.
And then I can show it to my team, and my team can be like, wow, this is really great. Like, let's continue to work on it. Or, hey, this is awesome, but let's put a pin in it because there are other priorities, and maybe this is not hitting like the priorities that we need right now.
Right.
So it's very much like a team-based, collaborative type of decision making in regards to like design and direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part of it is the leading part. So as a senior game designer, I have been given the opportunity to help be like the go-to person and become leadership for certain things in the game. So right now, I am leading accessibility. So I
Nice.
really do help our team with figuring out what are our needs and what is that we can do to try to integrate some of those things into the designs that we're making, into the systems that we're making from the ground up, and also being it designed that way so that we don't have to worry about making a menu that where you need to go through and turn on an option. Like the game's design is already built in with that in mind.
Mm.
So we're really trying to be innovative in that space as much as we can because our game is a new IP, and like we can do anything with it. We don't have to do what somebody else does. We can
Nice.
make our own stuff. But of course, there are certain systems that are already general, and we should do them because it is standard. For example, something like subtitles. Like subtitles exist, everybody know they exist.
Right.
So let's just keep that in mind and add it to our list of things that we want to do.
That's so
Um,
cool.
so it's really, really cool. And then aside from that team, we call it a strike team because it's a smaller team of people with all
Mm.
disciplines that do that. And then I am also in the strike team that deals with um, how can I mask it so that I don't reveal too much. With socialization
Okay.
type of thing. So how the player interacts with other players, what types of experiences we create to bring people together and want to do things together or
Right.
experience things together. Because that's something that I think a lot of games out there are doing. Like there are many many games that are 2 player, 3 player, 4 player,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But they don't quite get the hey, we're playing together and like what you do affects me type of thing.
Right.
So I'm trying to lead in that space and see what we can do
Nice.
there. But yeah, so that's part of being a senior. It's the design, the implementation, and leading. And it's cool because you need those social skills to like talk with
Right.
people. If somebody gets really mad, you have to go in them and be like, "Hey, Bob, I saw that you were a little mad in the meeting. Like, what's going on? Like, can I help you in any way? Is there something that I said? Did I
Right.
make you mad?
Right.
How
Because I'm
can
sure it was
we
this
like
other
move
person that
this
made you mad,
forward?"
not me, right, Bob?
Right, exactly. It's like, and can I support you? I've had instances where somebody's going through like a really, really tough time, and I have to be like, "Hey, like, are you
Real life.
okay? Like, don't forget to like take time for yourself and care for your family or like your kid or whatever it is, right? Because life happens. Life doesn't stop just because you're working.
It sure doesn't.
And we also have to keep that in mind, like as devs, is the fact that there's life and work balance to be had, and a lot of things are changing in the world around us, and there's a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
So keeping mindful of that too, making sure that if there's something going on in the world, like I don't want to be like, hey, let's have a design meeting where we do this mini game. It's like, there's really crappy stuff going on in the world. It's okay to skip this meeting. Let's pick it back up tomorrow.
Nice.
It's
Nice.
also learning to understand how to read people,
Right.
um, and how to not only read people's body language, but also like I'm very observant. Like I am always looking at how people move their eyes and how they use their hands, what words and vocabulary they're using, the way that they're breathing. Like I'm very observant. And that helps in being able to be like, oh, this person's a little upset or this person's really angry, and then I can talk to them and like not put them on the spot and like
Right.
understand them and care about them, like, hey, if like you need to like step out, like just step out, or like, hey, I am it also means that I can stand up for myself if somebody's talking to me a certain way.
Right.
It's like, hey, I noticed that you kind of like took a low jab at me and I
Right.
didn't really like that. Is there a way that we can resolve this so it doesn't happen again? Like, I really want you to respect me and I in turn respect you. So let's work together to be better to each other, right?
Nice.
So it's hard to do that, right? Because
Right.
I I never like to use it as an excuse or like as a crutch, but I'm also a woman.
Yep.
And with that comes a whole set of other challenges that other dudes in the game dev don't experience.
Right.
So yes, people have disrespected me because I'm young. So when I first started, I was like in my late 20s. So it was the disrespect of like, you don't know enough because you're in your early 20s and this is your first game dev job. So don't tell me what to do. And I was only giving them feedback and notes on their design. It's not even like I was telling them what to do. But
Right.
there's that aspect. There's the aspect of being a Latina woman. And that comes with a set of challenges of like, well, you're too feisty or you're too emotional, right? Or you are too loud. And it's just like, it's my personality, but you can compare with another dude who's really loud and really annoying and like
Yeah.
very emotional, but they don't get any slack. So it's like, what? Okay. And then there's the aspect of being petite. So this happened more so when I was at work, like in real life, because now everything is remote. I
Right.
haven't been in the office for almost 3 years now.
Same here.
But yeah, right. But when I was in the office, I like to dress nice, and put my makeup on and like do my hair and things like that. And that comes with a caveat of people trying to like hit on me or like take me out on dates. Um, there was a moment where I had like four dudes like trying to talk to me at my previous studio, and they were older than I, much older than I,
I
and it
get
was
that a lot.
awkward. It was a little awkward because I was like, I'm not interested. But
Right.
then by saying I'm not interested, then I get treated badly, and that's not
Right.
fair. Like, and you're much older than me. I'm not interested in dating you, but then why do you all of a sudden like not respond to me when I ask you a question about the game that we're making? Like you tell me
Yeah.
rude. So there's like a lot of things
Yeah.
that I could share with you about what it has been like being like a young woman that is from a different country and has a different background, and like how
Right.
people treat me based off of those things. And you would never think sometimes, like, really, just because you're Latina and like, you're small and stuff, people like want to think that it's okay to touch you? Like, what?
Wow.
It's like, it's weird. It's
Yeah.
definitely weird, and people think they're entitled to certain things because of it, and it's wild. But I'm glad that
Wow.
remote work has like stopped all those things
Sure.
in the time being, and people are more mindful of the way that they speak to you now, because of remote work, which has been really nice too. And I understand like fatigue when people just get tired of just constantly being on Zoom and constantly talking.
Right.
And I understand that too. So sometimes it's knowing that the anger that somebody is showing you is not you. It's just that they're carrying a lot of weight and they
Yeah.
don't even know how to express it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, hey, I don't have to be the target of your emotions. Like, I'm not your punching bag. I didn't do
Right.
anything. And it's hard to stand up for yourself in those instances where you don't want to stir the pot or you don't want to be the problematic person. So it's difficult to navigate those type of social situations.
Right.
But we all need to deal with them at some point in our lives. You
Right.
can go to the grocery store and deal with something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do. I tell you, I think it's I'm glad that you are, I mean, and obviously you are a very strong woman to be able to, to handle and get your way through to where you are now. And I think it's a credit to you, and that that you've done that, and I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you
no,
so much.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. There was 2 things I wanted to ask you about, and I guess when I ask you this about about the game type thing, we'll keep it vague because I don't wanna these aren't
Mhm.
like nitpicky type questions, just
Yeah.
a so my 2 questions are about Q&A
Mhm.
on a game,
Mhm.
like what you have to help with on that, or I
Mhm.
guess direct that, and then the other is like, without giving away the platforms, but I mean, is like a game like that you be working on now
Mhm.
or recently, or maybe another game, but I mean, you have to like when you start a game, is it like multiple platforms considered from the beginning, or is it just here's the game and let's get going, and then you're able to start working on the platform? Or is that all? Is that all? Is that all something that coincides with the design from the beginning that
Mhm.
you're planning on putting it on Xbox, PlayStation, PC, GameCube, whatever, not GameCube, obviously, but but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. Great question. So, in regards to QA, and there's been a lot of talk to this like for a long time. It's like QA are not really game developers because they're not in engine and they're not designing stuff. But let me tell you, QA is the most critical role in the game dev pipeline. And
Wow.
QA testers and QA quality assurance managers, like every role in QA in any studio is of utmost importance, and they are game devs, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to fix the issues of the games. We wouldn't know how to iterate and move forward with certain things. We wouldn't know what players are enjoying versus what they are not enjoying if it wasn't for QA. So it's a huge and important role. And a lot of developers from the old school started as QA developers and are now full time like engineers and designers at a higher level. So with QA, if as a designer, right? So I can only speak of my experience. It may be different for other developers, but the way that it has come across in my experience is that if I want something specific to be tested that I'm looking for, let's say I designed a mini game and I, implemented the logic, everything's working functionally the way that I think it is.
Mhm.
I can pass it along to QA and tell them, hey, like when we do a playtest, can you look at this mini game, play it from start to finish, and let me know if it's breaking, let me know if the design makes sense, let me know if there's something that is making sense, let me know if it's accessible. I get to choose the questions and answers
Nice.
that I would like to extract from that playtest. In other parts, of course, we send it off to QA and say, hey, if you find any bugs, like try to break it. If you find any bugs, let me know so that I can fix them before we need to send it off to wherever it needs to go. So there is aspect as well. And
Mhm.
then in huge games like God of War and um, Horizon Forbidden West, like in these huge games that are super open world,
Mhm.
the QA testing is super critical because they constantly need to play everything all the time because anything can break at any moment because the game is so big. There's
Right.
no way for any one developer to be like in a one corner fixing everything and making it perfect. There's like no way any of us could do that.
Right. Because if
Um,
you fix like one thing, it could actually break another whole set of
Yes,
rules.
a domino effect,
Oh,
exactly.
man.
And imagine then if it's you're working remotely and the designer is in California and Los Angeles,
Mhm.
but the programmer is in Poland. So imagine the difference, right?
Right.
And the miscommunication that could happen if the programmer in Poland is doing something, at 9 a.m. their time, but it's already like I don't know, 9 p.m. California time, and the designer is not in the know of what's going on, right? So that's how things break. And people sometimes get upset. They're like, "How dare you put out a game that is broken? There's this bug. Like I'm paying $70 for this," and it's just
Yeah.
like sometimes it's really difficult to be able to pinpoint a problem in like a little corner in a collision on a rock in the middle of who knows where, nowhere in the desert of your level, that
Wow.
really nobody paid
Oh, that's so
attention
funny.
to because
R
there's so many other more important things
Right.
to take care of, right? So it's wild, and I respect QA so much, and the work that they put in is vast because they're constantly reporting bugs. They're assigning it to the game developers. We get them, we read them, we see what's possible, what's not possible. We have meetings about it. Like it's critical work that is done, and we do it at Brassline. We have playtests right now once a week. So like every Thursday, literally a couple hours ago, I was in a playtest session with the rest of the team, and we
Nice.
were playing the game that we are making right now, and we were doing a bunch of things like trying to break things, trying to see how the controller feels,
Mhm.
trying to see how like the sequences feel. Is the pacing okay? Are we getting bugs? Is something spawning properly? Is the audio and the music triggering properly? Like all those little things we were like going through it with QA on Discord.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we're working remotely, so it's kind of cool, and we can all share our screens so that we can all see
Right.
each other's playthrough and things like that.
That's
So
awesome.
QA is great. And then when it comes to the other part, which is how do you figure out platforms? So I have been at a studio where we have said from the beginning, we're only going to build for high-end PCs. So like gamers, we're really going to target gamers, right? So all the graphics, like the assets, the 3D models were being built like super high resolution.
Yeah.
Like you need like a really nice graphics card to run this game. And then the game's developed for 2.5 years or almost 3 years. And then in comes one of the leadership. We got a really good deal from Apple, so we're going to make the game for iOS. And everybody was like, "Excuse me? The game that we're building is for gaming PCs. You want us to run it on a potato of an iPhone?" Like, what?
That's so funny.
But it's hard. Like, what are you going to do as a developer when leadership
Right.
comes and says, we're going to get $5 million from iOS, or we're going to get $6 million from Google, and we have to port our game to mobile, no ifs, ands, or buts. And you're like, I don't know how we're going to do that. Like, we're just going to, our high resolution fishes are going to look like circles. Because how are we going to run it otherwise? Like the graphics compatibility is just not the same. It's
Oh, that's so
impossible.
funny.
So I would say that studios with leaders who are not knowledgeable of game design, so you have those people, and
Mhm.
they exist in every single studio. There's
Wow.
leadership and executives who have never made games before, who don't really play games, but they have the business knowledge to have
Right.
leadership roles, and they think that you can just literally switch something that runs on the PS5 and then run it on the Nintendo Switch. And that's not how it works. You cannot
Right.
just, press a little button in the game engine and poof, it just pops out like a simpler version of your game. No.
Right.
It means taking all the 3D models in the entire game and creating them lower poly, a lower resolution. Sometimes
Hmm.
that means recreating some those assets, and that's gonna take so much time. Imagine
Yeah.
if you have like, over 100,000 3D assets in your worlds. Um, that may mean going back into the game engine and creating some type of loading uh, situation, which a lot of games do, where like if things are really, really far away, everything kind of looks like obfuscated. You can't really see it. And
Hmm.
then the closer you get to the thing, then things start populating. That's a loading system feature. And if a game studio doesn't have one, that means creating it from scratch or buying it from somewhere, and that's money and time.
Right.
So it's not easy to make those decisions. So if a game studio does that like midway through development,
Hmm.
that to me that's very bad leadership and they don't understand how a game works. So yes, ideally you make the choice at the beginning of the game. Like when you're conceptualizing, I'm gonna make, I don't know, Doom 3590
Yeah.
and it's going to come out for PS8 and Xbox 1000, and that's it. We're not going to port it to Nintendo Switch, we're not going to port it to mobile, we're going to port it to next gen consoles,
Right.
and you stick with that, and that's your bread and butter. And people will complain, they'll be like, when is it going to come out on Switch, when is it going to come out on mobile, why
Yeah.
isn't it coming out on the PS3? And it's like, because we have to lock it in, because
Right.
everything about the game's development is going to rely on that decision. So, what game engine you're buying, what software you're buying, the people that you are hiring, all of it relies on the set of platforms that you are going to be building for. Because if you don't run on mobile, you're not going to need a mobile engineer, right?
Right.
If you are running on console and you're worried about graphics, you may need a graphics programmer versus maybe on iOS, you may need a graphics programmer, but not full time. You may need them part time for
Hmm.
a specific amount of time for release.
Hmm.
So it really comes down to time and money. So that is my opinion. Those
Yeah.
things should be locked in as early as possible so that you can make the best out of your time and the money that you have.
Well, it makes more
Um,
sense.
yeah, and then it's just a big stressor for no reason. Like imagine like my team what we had to go through trying to redesign a game for mobile that was never meant to be on mobile.
Right.
Controllers are not even the same. We had like photo mode, like we had to I had to redesign how photo mode worked because for iOS there's certain options that your PC allows you to have that iOS doesn't. So it was
Wow.
removing some features and adding other ones in. So it's a lot of problem solving unnecessarily, a lot of added stress,
Right.
just because we got a few more millions. And
They're not
like
going into your pocket, right?
they're not going into my pocket for sure.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, it's difficult, and more so when you are at a level like me that you're not in executive leadership and you don't
Hmm.
get to make the calls. And
Right.
if you raise something, it's more like, hey, please take this into consideration, instead of being like, wow, no, like we really need to have a meeting about this. So
Right.
we have no say. So we kind of just have to do as leadership tells us when it comes
Right.
to those decisions, and it really sucks. Because sometimes you wish that you were involved in decision making. Like,
Right.
hey, everybody, we're about to get a deal from Apple that's X amount of money. Like, do you all think that this is possible? Like, is it feasible for us? Should we not take the deal? Should we just focus on PC? Like, it would be nice to at least be given the option to weigh in on the decision
Right.
instead of just being told, like, this is what you're
Blindsided.
going to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
out of the blue on like a Monday morning, and you're like, "You're joking me. I'm gonna quit."
And you have
I
2 months
didn't
to get
come
this
here to
done.
make mobile
Go.
games.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whee!
Like that's what happens,
Ah,
right? And
goodness.
we all go through that at some point with some feature or some design that
Mhm.
some leader may not know what the heck they're talking about, and they're like, "Yeah, by tomorrow, I want the projectile system to also shoot fireballs," and you're like, "What?"
Out my butt. How's
I was
that?
like, "Who's gonna make the fireball? Because it's not gonna be me."
Yeah. Like, hang on, I'm gonna go buy a 2 liter of Fireball for the staff because we're gonna need to do
Right.
that here in a little bit. Oh goodness,
Seriously.
goodness.
Yep. And it all goes
Uh,
back to it. Games
yeah,
are hard. And it's because of that. Because that's not even a technical problem. Again, that's what I said before. It's a
yeah,
social experience problem. It's how do
yeah.
you talk to people? How do you communicate with people? How do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback? It's
Right.
a huge, huge part of being a game developer, and it's often neglected and never talked about. Because you think it's like, oh, you're just a person. But no, a person's not just a person. There's
Yeah.
multiple layers to what makes that person a person. It's their personality, it's their character, it's their vocabulary, it's their social upbringing, it's their culture, it's their
Mhm.
sexual identity, it's everything. And you have to take all of those things into consideration when you make a decision like you're making a mobile game.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And go. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
all of
Well,
a sudden your whole everything starts coming out. It's like if you're Latino like me, you'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" You throw out like your feistiness, and you get all
that's so
all
funny.
all wild. And then the big programmer is just like, "We can't do this. Like we only have 3 months to release. Like blah blah blah." So all of a sudden everybody's angry and mad, and we're bringing all of our personality and character into
Yeah.
everything, and then it just
No.
makes for a bad day.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh my goodness. Elaine, oh my goodness. Thank you so much
You're so
for talking to
welcome.
me today. I've absolutely enjoyed this. I mean that. It's very fascinating and thank you for your insight into the world of development of games. It's so fascinating to me as a person who plays games and enjoys games, to hear, because it's not just, there's always a side of like, oh, spend money on a game, play a game. Oh, it's okay. Play another game.
Mhm,
There's so much that goes into what you do, and I just think it's
mhm.
so fascinating, and hopefully people will get the enlightenment that I did today. I think it's very cool. As we start to wrap things up, I guess I would like to ask you just one more basic question that I kind of ask everybody, and this is, and you can give me more than one answer,
Okay.
but this is, I guess, I'd like to. What game? And I'll preface this by saying that we all know about. In other words, it's been announced
Uh-huh.
that, are you most looking forward to playing that isn't out yet?
Let's see. There's a lot.
Oh,
But
I'm
I know
sure.
in the next couple of days, the new Dead Space remake is coming out, and
Yeah.
I'm really, or rather, remaster.
Hmm.
And I'm really excited for it because Dead Space is like one of my favorite games of all time. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm really hoping that it's not just a remaster just for the sake of graphics, but it's like
Right.
they really took their time and gave it some love, and that it feels good and plays well. So I'm really looking forward to that one. What else am I looking forward to? There's a bunch of games that like are in development that I don't even know when they're coming out, but Redfall, I'm interested in that one.
Yeah.
I'm interested, obviously, in the Breath of the Wild 2.
Same.
I love Zelda. It's definitely if anybody were to ask me like what's your favorite game, it's Ocarina of Time. That's like such a memorable and special game to me, and I feel like
Amazing game.
it was really well designed, and like I have played it multiple times because when I was younger, I always wanted to like beat my time from previous years. So like
Hmm.
once every summer, I would be like, okay, I'm gonna give myself 4 days to finish the entire Ocarina of Time, and then I would slowly start like decreasing the numbers. Like I want to beat it in 3 days now. So I played it multiple times. But yeah,
That's
Breath
awesome.
of the Wild 2, I'm super excited for, and I can't wait to play it.
Awesome. Awesome.
Also, the Hades 2. that was
Oh yeah,
announced. That was announced at the Game Awards. I was like really excited when I saw the trailer for it.
yeah. Hades 1 was amazing.
Yes,
I was
I
blown
really
away.
enjoyed it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me
And I
too.
don't often play roguelikes like that, but that
Hmm.
one was different in comparison to other types of games in the genre. It felt more accessible to me and more simple to play because I'm a button masher. Like I
Same
cannot
here.
memorize combos for my life. So that's
Right.
why I enjoy playing fighting games, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I always make my friends mad because when if I win, they're like, "Oh, it's out of luck. You didn't even know what you were doing."
And you're like,
But it's like it's true because
don't
I'm
I?
always just like playing
Yeah.
all the buttons.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Oh goodness. Elaine, thank you so much for being here today. This is so awesome. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on today. And if you don't mind, maybe tell people how they can maybe reach out to you on social media. If they have other questions or want to follow your work and your studio's work. And plus, I'll have all those links in the description below. But just just to let people know, how they can get hold of you.
Yeah, of course. So right now, the only social media platform that I really use is Twitter. And my handle is Chulatastic, Chulatastic.
Nice.
So I mainly share indie games or other games in development and like kind of behind the scenes game dev stuff that people are doing that I think are cool and game job opportunities, content creator opportunities that come up on my feed. Like I
Nice.
generally try to keep it professional and positive and
Mhm.
not try to share negativity and things like that. But sometimes I will comment on something that I don't think is right. And I'll, share my opinion out, but I try not to do that because my mental health is important to me, and I
Right.
don't like to engage in discussions that could hurt me in some type of way.
Right.
But I'm also on LinkedIn professionally, and I do share some opportunities there as well. Yeah. So in either of those, if anybody has any questions or wants insight specifically on game design or like how to get into games, feel free to send me a message, and I usually respond relatively quickly.
That
And I
you
can
do.
get you some resources.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. Elaine, thank you again. Elaine
No,
Gomez
thank you so
Sanchez.
much. I appreciate you having me and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about my life and what I love. So thank you so much to you as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will send you the links and everything once this goes live. I'll give you all that information. But thanks everybody here for joining us at Outbreak Gamers. We have we have over 50 interviews now in the can with all different kinds of game designers and influencers and programmers and people in the know and just people that enjoy playing games. And that's to me that's what it's all about is a good community, good, friendly people that are out there and supporting each other. And again, thanks everybody for being here at Outbreak Gamers.